Welcome to Even Tacos Fall Apart, a podcast where we do our best to own our stories, love ourselves, and thrive as we become more mentally stable, emotionally healthy, and physically well with each passing day. I'm MommaFoxFire, and I am so glad you're here. Before we dive into today's incredible episode, let's talk about something important, and that's just simply January. For many, it's a fresh start, but it can also be tough for a lot of folks. The holidays are over, the days are short and dark, and life might feel a bit heavier than usual. If you're setting big goals or just trying to get through the day, know that you're not alone. Whether you're easing into the new year or feeling pressure to hit the ground running, I encourage you to take a breath, step back, and check in with yourself. It's okay to take your time. Your well-being is worth more than any resolution or to-do list. Now, let's set up today's conversation. We're talking about holistic recovery and sobriety. Sobriety is a huge step, and for anyone walking that path, it's a brave and challenging choice. But what happens after you stop drinking or using substances? What does thriving actually look like? It's not just about staying sober. It's about building a life that makes you want to stay sober. My guest, Brian McAlister, has walked this road and then some. He battled addiction for 2 decades before making the life-altering decision to pursue recovery. Today, he's not only thriving in his own life, but also helping others do the same. Brian's approach goes beyond the traditional methods of recovery. He's about creating a life that's full, one where you rebuild relationships, find financial stability, and take care of your mental and physical health, and also connect with a purpose that fuels you. In this interview, we're going to hear Brian's story and the hard-earned wisdom he's picked up along the way. We'll cover what it takes to confront fear, replace unhealthy distractions, and start asking the right questions to guide your recovery and your life. If you've ever wondered how to take the next step in building a meaningful and balanced life, whether you're in recovery or not, this episode has something for you. Before we jump in, I want to remind you also that this podcast thrives on connection. If you're enjoying the show, please take a moment to leave a review or share it with someone who might need to hear it. You can also find me on all socials. I'm MommaFoxFire everywhere. Come say hi. Ask questions or share your story. Join the Discord. This community is for all of us, and I would love to hear from you. All right, let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Brian on Thriving Beyond Sobriety, a holistic recovery approach. Hello, and welcome to another Mental Health Monday. I hope you had a lovely weekend and a good Monday, as good as a Monday can be. I am really excited to wrap up this Monday with Brian McAlister, who is joining us today. So if you are here and you are joining us for this conversation, I appreciate you being here, whether you're here on Twitch or you're here on YouTube. Wherever you're joining us from, please know that we both appreciate you being here. Tyrion has been up in my business a little bit extra tonight, so we'll see how he does, but he is on the cat cam as well. And we do have a question queue open. So if you have any questions tonight for our guest, or for me, but usually for our guest, feel free to pop those into the chat, and we'll make sure to get them addressed while we are here today. Our topic is going to be Thriving Beyond Sobriety, and we're going to be talking about a holistic recovery approach. So Brian, thank you so much for agreeing to come here and share a little bit about your story, and I'm really excited for this conversation, but thank you first and foremost for agreeing to come on here.
Hey, absolutely, and thank you for introducing me to Tyrion. He's quite a cat.
Yeah, he's been a really, really good cat. He is sometimes a little bit on the needy side, but hey, so am I, so it's fine.
Exactly.
Well, let me introduce you to the folks who are here joining us or listening. On August 2nd, 1990, Brian McAlister emerged from a 20-year battle with addiction and alcoholism, embarking on a remarkable journey of recovery and resilience. His holistic approach to recovery extends beyond sobriety, encompassing career success, financial stability, healthy relationships, and spiritual growth. Brian's transformation from addict to corporate leader and entrepreneur led to the creation of the Amazon #1 best-selling book, Full Recovery, and the establishment of the Full Recovery Wellness Center. Committed to revolutionizing mental health, he introduced innovative solutions such as Freedom 365 and My Mental Health nonprofit to make treatment accessible to all. His belief in the teachability of full recovery and his exploration of groundbreaking approaches to mental health continue to inspire and transform lives. And I have lots of socials to share with you guys if you are looking to connect with Brian or buy his book or anything like that. If you want to check him out, I'm going to post some of these in the chat for you right now. Feel free to click through on any of those. And y'all know I always say that engagement is king when it comes to social media. So if you do click through and you do give him a follow, make sure you also go through and like a couple of the posts and those kinds of things so that you can get a little bit of support, extra support, all that stuff. Like, review, subscribe, all those things so that we can get a good showing on everything for Brian. But again, Brian, thank you. And I'm really excited to talk about all this with you today.
Well, I'm ready.
Yeah. So we do already have a question in the question queue, and I think it's going to be a good opener. Bitemark would like to know, what is your favorite poem?
I guess my favorite poem is probably the Desiderata, but I like poem by Buddha too, and it's the thought manifests as the word manifests as the deed becomes habit, and habit hardens into character. So watch the thought in its way with love and let it spring forth for all human beings, because as the shadow follows the body, as we think, so we become.
I like that. I like that. So I've got, it looks like a link maybe to the right thing here with Desiderata. Is that the right one by
Yes.
Max Ehrman? Okay.
Yes. It's spectacular. It sums up life in one short essay.
Yep, that's perfect. All right, well, I've got a link to that, and thank you. That's a good one. We have not had that one before.
Okay.
Because I didn't know how to spell it, so.
There you go.
You know, there are some poems that are just really popular and really like everyone's gonna like this poem, and we've had lots of guests say this is my favorite one, and it's always interesting. Even whenever someone likes the same poem, it's always for a different reason. Like everyone always has their unique reason for enjoying something, and it's really neat to kind of make those connections. I think that's great. So what do you do when you are not busy working? What do you enjoy doing outside of work?
I enjoy being outdoors. I enjoy camping. I enjoy walking. I have a wonderful Rottweiler, and we walk miles and miles every day. I live in the Southwest. I live in the desert. So it's good mental health time for me. When I hit a position in my day where I'm overwhelmed, or I just really feel like things are getting to me and I'm not as productive as I should, I wind up going out for a nice long walk, clearing my head. And it's amazing. Or I sit in my hot tub and the answers just seem to pop into my head. You know, it's pretty, when I'm relaxed and not keeping my own counsel, that's when it happens.
I like that you said, when you're trying to be productive, you go for a walk or you sit in the hot tub, because a lot of people wouldn't view that as, oh, this is going to help me be productive. Like sometimes you treat those things as, oh, I have to earn them, but really like those can be the things that energize you and get you to the point where you can be productive.
Absolutely. Well, think about it. We've all had a time when we had to remember a date or a name or an appointment or something. And the harder we thought about it, the less likely we were to remember. But when we changed our focus and moved to something else, the answer just seems to hop into our head. And that's the way life kind of works.
Yeah, that's
Can't
very
force my
true.
way into these things.
No. I love this comment. Walking or hot tub, both excellent thought sorters. What a good like categorization of those activities too. Thought sorters. That's
Yeah.
great. Shower thoughts are a thing for a reason, for sure.
Yes.
That's very true. Do you have a true crime story that fascinates you?
You know, I kind of do. I was raised. I'm an older guy. I'm 67 years old. So I came through life in the 70s. In the late 60s, and back then, I'm sure a lot of people have seen the movie American Gangster. Where he was a heroin dealer, and there's a common theme that runs through people with that type of an attitude. Whether it's Keith Raniere, the cult leader, or Frank Lucas, the drug dealer. These guys. You would think it's money, but it's power. And it's really misuse of their gifts. They have whatever it is that cause people to be attracted towards people. These folks have it, but they also have um, a psychotic type background. That they don't feel people's feelings, and they really use that power to tear people down. I think about Frank Lucas when they busted him in the 70s. He had something like $600 million. Like so, it wasn't for the money, and he could have gotten out so many times. But I think of Keith Raniere, all the foul things that he did. It wasn't for money anymore. It was for power. It was for self gratification, and it's really in folks like this. I guess because I'm an addict and a recovering addict and alcoholic, I gave my free will over to a substance. I gave my free will over to alcohol and drugs for many years. And these guys take people who are in a weakened state and they take their free will and misuse it. And everything I've done in recovery is really to do just the opposite. To show people how to draw out their gifts and talents, to be themselves. Like the Irish say, "'Tis himself." You got to be yourself. Everybody else is taken. So, whatever's in you, whatever the creator, whatever your religious or non-religious background is, we all came from someplace. I appeared, I'm here, I'll disappear. So the idea is while I'm here, there's a purpose for me. When I find that purpose and I draw that out and I take an action towards fulfilling my dreams, that's when things seem to go well. That's what I feel good about being Brian.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned something that I think is interesting because, talking about these cult leaders and folks who really draw people in to manipulate them and to kind of feed on that kind of thing. But talking about addicts in that context, do you think that an addict or someone with an addictive personality is more likely to fall for those kinds of things or fall for a charismatic leader who starts a cult and starts doing all these things? Do you think that's something that they're more susceptible to?
Sometimes, but it's the whole idea of being using a chemical, for example, whatever, or food, or even work. I know people that get off on, whatever unhealthy distraction we use. Addicts are capable of an intense single-minded focus that few people are really capable of. I think about myself. There was a time I would have crawled across hot coals on my face to get what I needed, and that was an acceptable way to live. So, I don't know if there are any more uh, in tune to being drawn into that, but I think there's that same emptiness, that same God hole, that same need that they're trying to fill, and they just fill it in a different way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's definitely something that I want to get into with you because I know that um sometimes you get to the point where you're like I'll do anything. I will do anything for this. And in some cases that's a substance and in some cases it is things like work. And I don't know, do
Mhm.
you consider that to be of the same? Like is one just as not bad but maybe destructive or unhealthy as another, or are there some addictions that you think are well okay yeah you're addicted to work or whatever but it's not as bad as something else, or do you think it's all like it's
Wait,
all needs work?
it all works on the same part of the brain, and it's really also, like I said, it's an unhealthy distraction. And I'll speak for myself. When I first got sober, I became addicted to work. I just shifted my focus. It was a healthier
Ah,
focus. It was better for my family. But after a period of time, it became an unhealthy distraction that was interrupting with other parts of my life, family obligations, things like that. So it was all a part of a process as how to get through that. But that's people go through it with sex and all kinds of other things too. It all depends on where you're at. But for me, um, it's taken a long time to get real balance in my life. How's that? You know what I mean? Where I feel like I'm in control of the choices I make, because that's really ultimately the only thing I do have control over is my own choices.
yeah, yeah, that's the only thing that any of us have control over really.
Yes, without a doubt.
In your bio, you mentioned that your recovery began on a specific date. Like you have it dialed in August 2nd, 1990. So, what was it about that date? What was the turning point that kind of led you to this life altering decision to pursue recovery?
Well, it really was a moment of clarity, and it came about. I'll back up. I started drinking and drugging when I was 12. I came from a long line. I was in the CIA, Catholic Irish alcoholic. That's what my family was. We came. My first person who helped me out, my first mentor, told me, you come by it honestly. But in the beginning, it was a way of fun. It was party. It was a way out, and it was something I did well, and I enjoyed it. And what happened was, I never counted on the progression. I never thought where I would wind up. So like over the years, things changed. I started using alcohol and drugs. Friends changed, school stunk. I got bad at it, but I always liked to work. I was always a worker. I got not just my alcoholism from my family, they had a good work ethic. So they taught me that. So I didn't mind going to work. So I worked on the docks. I worked unloading trucks at night when most people were out playing in high school. And I learned how to be a druggie there. Because the guys I worked with were all alcoholics and drug addicts, and I was very susceptible. I was a kid. So I got expelled from a Catholic high school for conduct on becoming a Catholic, that kind of deal, which gave me a real bad not hatred, just and I didn't care about God anymore. It gave me an
Sure.
excuse. Okay, turn the other cheek, turn the other stuff that they tell you, and all this Catholic stuff that was pounded in my head. And the first time you screw up, they throw you out. And like, it was a lie. I was the first time I screwed up. I should have thrown it out years earlier. So I went on my own adventure, and I became an alcoholic, a drug addict, a drug dealer, a Harley rider. I jumped up, bought a bike, drove across the country. And along the way, I grabbed a girl from high school who was beautiful, and I was in love with her. And we've been married since I'm 19. We're married 47 years. And, we jumped and we wound up taking off. So what happened was the progression of the disease happened. I wound up having many automobile accidents. I wound up having many, fights, all kinds of nonsense that goes with that lifestyle. And one day I was leaving my wife and my small son. By now I have a small son. We're living in Phoenix, Arizona. And I drove my Harley into the desert, all cocained out, and I crashed. I went off into the desert cliff, and I was coyote bait, and God started working in my life. I know there's a long way to get there, but I'm telling you for a
That's
reason.
okay.
It really goes
Yeah.
to that point. So I was tourist. I was 40 miles from anything that looked like civilization. It's out in the desert. A tourist from Minnesota, the state troopers told me, called them. And what happened was they pulled off on a frontage road in the desert to relieve themselves. And they saw me down in this ditch, waiting for the sun to
Wow.
go down, unconscious. And they drove about 15 miles to the closest payphone because there's no cell phones then. And they called the police. I have no idea who made that call. So they helicoptered me in. I had a broken back. I had a traumatic brain injury. They're going to amputate my leg. I still have 19 screws and plates and everything in my leg. They're going to do all this stuff. And, you're in the hospital, and I'm coming to now, and I'm drunk. I'm coked. I'm insane. I'm out of my mind. And I have 380 stitches in my head. So
Gosh.
at that moment, when they put the little hospital thing around you, like in the emergency room, the curtain, I'm yelling and screaming and acting like a lunatic. But when they put that thing out around me, I had my first moment of clarity in many years of my drunken, drug addicted lifestyle. And it was this: God, they're going to cut my leg off. Help. Help. It's amazing when all that atheist stuff goes right out the window when they're going to cut your leg off. All of a sudden
Yeah.
you're like, wait a second, this does not sound good. Soon as I had that thought, the wife that I was leaving showed up in the hospital. They called her. A doctor who did not work in that hospital heard me acting like a moron and screaming, yelling, grabbed my wife, said, I've been out of medical school for 3 weeks. I'm visiting somebody here in this hospital. I could probably save his leg if they keep the infection down and move him over. So all these things start falling in line for me. So that's what happened. They moved me to another hospital. They put all these screws and plates and all this other stuff, which was experimental at the time, and it put me in full traction. I got a broken back. I got several crushed vertebrae, and all these things are happening. So as soon as that starts happening, I immediately forgot asking God for help. Immediately, just went right
Sure.
up. Didn't
Yeah.
even think about it. I was back on Brian time. So like I didn't think like the coke, the booze, the bike, anything had to do with anything. Just an unfortunate situation that could happen to anybody. So I get out of the hospital after a couple of months, and I spent 4 years learning how to walk again, like on crutches, on and
Yeah.
off. It was a miserable deal. But you know what? I know now that even God put my stubbornness and rottenness in me for a reason, because they used to tell me you probably never walk right. And I was like, wrong guy. You know what I mean? I'll be tap dancing out of here. So all that intense single-minded focus I put towards a project, learning how to walk. And we're very creative people. So the first thing I did when I got home was I threw the crutches over the railing, hopped down the stairs on my backside, and walked a mile to the bar in 105-degree
Gosh.
Phoenix heat. And then I realized it's tough to drink on the way home. So I manufactured a beer holder for each crutch. And I'm thinking, I'm going to patent this. This is perfect. Everybody's going to want one of these things. So this is where my mind was at. So this went on for 6 more years of misery and circling the drain. So by the time I met I woke up behind a body shop, an auto body shop in a place called Nutley, New Jersey. And I was pretty nutley myself at the time. And I had no idea how I got there. I had been away from home for days. And I walked out to the sun that morning, and that moment in the hospital when I asked God for help flashed into my consciousness. And that's why I told that story. Had I not had that experience, which was horrific, I wouldn't have had that to draw on that morning to ask for help. So that's the day I said, I realized that I wasn't going to die, because I thought I was going to die. I never thought I'd live to be 30. I was 33. And I was like, I'm not going to die. I'm going to live. And that's what scared the hell out of me, because I had all the conniving, all the cleverness, all the stuff I did. I didn't have it anymore. I was at the mercy of the world. And that was the day I got into a detox, the first and only time. And to me, that's a gift from God. And I knew that time my wife was leaving by then. And, she had been dragged through she's like the wagon wheels, dragged through all the mud, back and forth across the country. And my son was 10, and everybody was done with me. And that was the day I changed my life. And that was the day I took an action. So I'm sorry for a long-winded way around, but that's how it happened.
Yeah. Listen, we love a long-winded here. It's fine. You're fine. You're in good
Okay.
company for long-winded. It's
Okay.
all good. So what was
All
it
right.
about, like, waking up behind this bar? What popped into your head that brought you back to that? Was it just like, oh shit, I don't know where I am or what happened or anything? What kind of brought that back to you? Was it waking up and not knowing what was going on, or something else?
Yes, that
Or
was part of it. No, that was part of it. And that had been happening more and more frequently, because I was, a
uh,
drug addict and alcoholic. And I remembered the night before standing with somebody I had known for years. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't pull their name up. So I'm like, oh my God,
wow.
you finally crossed the line. Like, you're done. You'll never think. And I couldn't even read. I was so shot. Everything moves around on the page. I'd been smoking a lot of dust. This really make it. I was trying to kill myself. It was like a long drawn out suicide. And I just had that moment of clarity, that I stood up there, and that moment popped into my head, like I'm in the same place. The first time when I went off the cliff, I didn't realize it. I had nothing to base it on.
Right.
This time I saw myself standing with my toes over the edge, saying, here we go. It's going to happen all over again. And that was the gift, is that I had that to draw on. I had that. And I called Paula, who's my wife of many years. And by then she was like, who cares? I've had enough of you, and
Yeah.
and rightfully so. You know what I mean? Because she's not an addict, she's not an alcoholic, and so but she hung tough, and that's how I wound up. I showed up at a treatment center that day. I remember it took me 5 bars to make it home. I was about an hour from I went from one bar to the next bar, because if not, I would
Yeah.
shake it apart.
Yeah.
And it was like I remember having my last drink in Bob's Irish Pub, and I just said, I told the guy I was with, I'm full. He said, what? He says, I said, I'm full. I'm not drinking anymore. He goes, you'll be drinking in, 10 minutes from now. I said, no, I'm done. See, that's the thing with an alcoholic or an addict. We have this skill set, whether it's the ability to focus, whether it's the stubbornness, whether it's the creativity to get what we want. Few people can get what they want or get that type of commitment, and I had been misusing my gifts, and that was a gift that God gave me. And I had been misusing it. And, I decided, hey, let me get sober and see if I can turn that thing around. And it's been a hell of an adventure.
Put it to some good use, right?
Yeah, that's it. Put all that hard living to good use too. Because
Yeah.
all the people I've had an opportunity to impact through my treatment center and the books and the software and everything, it's, they can't tell me it can't be done, because I'll put my story against anybody's.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good story. And so anybody can get it. You just have to have the willingness to give it a shot.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Bite Mark says it's not even the longest story I've heard today. It's all good.
Good.
That's
Okay,
perfect.
good.
Now you mentioned your wife and that she was already to the point where she was like, I'm done. That's it. I'm gonna leave, take the kid, whatever.
Yep.
Do you think, and you can always look back and say like, oh, if this could have happened totally differently, but do you think she was just absolutely done? Like if you had not gone to that recovery center, do you think that was it for y'all?
She was done.
Yeah.
She was definitely done. And she really, she hung tough. I mean, a long time, and I got to tell you, you know, we loved each other. We love each other, but addiction takes, yeah, it's mental illness. There is absolutely no doubt. You cannot do what I did and not be mentally ill. You're not. It's like your own brain is working against you constantly.
Yeah.
Your prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of your brain is telling you, I'm not going to do this tomorrow. I'm not going to be like that tomorrow. I'm not going to use right. But then the lizard brain's telling you and wake up like, oh my God, you're out of it, and you're almost like you're going to die if you think you're going to die if you don't get what you need.
Yeah.
So it's a really horrific thing, and she went through it. But you know what? She was actually going to therapy before I got sober. She was that was a good thing. She said, "This can't be normal. This cannot be, the way things are." So she was going to see therapists, and she was going to some 12-step meetings of her own, Al-Anon type stuff. So like when I acted like I acted and pushed the button, the reaction wasn't the same.
Yeah.
So it made me have to look at myself. So it was either go on to the bitter end, trying to blot out reality like I was, or man up and change. So I owe a lot of my recovery to her too.
That's awesome. I mean, yeah, credit where credit's due, right? You have people around you supporting you, and I'm sure you've thanked her 1,000 times or more since then.
Absolutely, absolutely. Try to make it up. It's
Yeah.
been a lot of good years since then.
Now you really emphasize now talking about this holistic approach to recovery and beyond just, oh, you have to stay sober. You really kind of talk about this holistic approach. Can you explain what that looks like in practice and why it's important to take a larger view than just I'm not going to drink or I'm not going to do this or I'm not going to do that? What's the difference there?
Absolutely. You've got to substitute something for all the time and energy you put into that. Addiction it's a physical, emotional, spiritual disease, but it kills us financially. It wrecks our careers. It wrecks our relationships. It's all encompassing. So, to get sober and stay sober long term, you really have to replace that. And part of it is finding out the reason why this was acceptable to begin with. Science says that, the best they figured out to date is it's 60% physical, 40% environmental. So like a lot of it's learned behavior. Like I said, I was from a drinking was just part of my culture. I mean, everybody did it. My first sponsor said, "Birds fly, fish swim, we drank." It just was what we did. And he was an Irishman off the boat, so he knew what he was talking about. But the thing for me is I had to discover not only why I drank, but like what was keeping me from fulfilling my potential. What was keeping me from discovering what gifts the creator built into me. Because when I use those gifts and I figure that out, and then I get over my fear of using them, I feel good about being me. Guy told me, you want better self-esteem? I said, yeah. He said, well, start doing some esteemable acts. I said, what? He goes, how about doing something for somebody else, you selfish son of a gun, and not expect anything back. So I picked up a lot of things. The longer I stayed sober, the more exposed I was to people who were having a good life, the kind of life I wanted. So when I got sober, I wound up getting a job for minimum wage. I came out, I had to work. I realized I had to work. I had to do something. And of course, my family life was in tatters. My finances were in tatters. And I went down, I was like, but if I don't stay busy, I'm gonna drink. And if I drink, I'm gonna drug. And it was just that type of deal. So I got this job working for a retailer, unloading trucks and just manual labor. I'm 33 years old. And I'm sober for the first time in 20 years. And I'm looking around I'm saying, the guy who's the boss is as dumb as a rock. I'm thinking like, I'm thinking that this guy's on the street, we would have gobbled him up. You know what I mean? He would be, but yet he's telling me how my family's going to live, how much I'm going to make, what kind of life. And I started asking myself better questions, and like, why couldn't I have his job? Why couldn't I do better? And that's how it started. And, I started looking around this building, and there was all types of people there who had positions of authority and were telling me, like I said, how to live. And I said, you know what? Instead of trying to undermine people, maybe I should try to help them out. Maybe I should do something like totally opposite of what I'm used to doing. And one was I went to the lead man, and I talked to him. After about 6 months, I said, "You seem to know what's going on here. Can you help me out?" And he says, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. What's in it for me?" I said, "Well, how's this? Delegate your work to me." I said, and go to your boss and do the same thing with him. See if he'll teach you what he knows. And that's how he did. So I pushed this guy up through the ranks. And when he got promoted, he pulled me up behind him. So, and every time I did this, I got exposed to more and more people who were capable of helping me get to my goals. So another thing, I started setting goals. My goals used to be get high for the day and ride my Harley. You know what I mean? All of a sudden, I'm looking at goals like I want to be a millionaire. I'd like to own my own business. I'd like to have a college fund for my son. Like all these things that I changed the way I talk to myself. I asked better questions and I started getting better answers. So that's really how it started. And as I got going through that, I got exposed to all types of people. Um, Within 5 years, the company I worked for, that building had 250 employees. Within 5 years, I had 10,000 people working for me, running their Mid-Atlantic division,
Wow.
producing $500 million a year in sales. And I'm not saying that to impress anybody, but to impress upon people that if I can do this, anybody can. And part of it was one of the men who I was exposed to said, I asked him how if he would help me, and he says, I've been waiting for you to ask me. I said, what do you mean? He goes, I've been looking at you. He goes, you don't realize it. He goes, we all have gifts. He goes, your gifts are you could walk into a room and you could read the room. He goes, you could see people. This guy I could trust. I better keep my eye on her in the corner. The guy behind me is a little shifty. He goes, they don't teach that in Harvard Business School. He goes, that's what kept you alive many years on the street. He goes, if you took your gifts and you combined them with the moral and ethical standards needed to stay sober, he says, and use them to the good of other people, he goes, there'd be no stopping you in business. And that's what I decided to do. But of course, the number one thing is I got to stay sober. So I forget what I am. And I know what I am. I'm an alcoholic and I'm a drug addict. Haven't had a drink a lot of today's, and it's turned into a pretty good life. But the day I forget is the day I'm doomed. So first things first. Anything I put before that, I'm going to lose anyway. My wife, my job, my career, my family, whatever. So that's kind of how it is. Like, so we help people figure out how to get ahead. What makes it? I'll give you an example. We had a guy, like I've met so many people to our treatment center. We had a guy I picked up, and we picked him up in the psych ward, and he had been there for several months because of what he had done. And when we get him to the house, we first get him detoxed, and we get him all off of everything he's on. And I realized the guys look. We have books all over the place. He's reading books like a book a day. I'm like, who reads a book a day? This guy's blazing through them. And I said to him, man, you seem pretty smart. Like, what's going on? He goes, yeah, I am pretty smart. I got a master's degree from the London School of Economics. I'm like, really? How'd you wind up in tell me your story. So it wound up like what made, wound up, he went up there was I don't want to say what he did, but it might, it might made the paper. So anyway, he tells me that I said, why did you choose to go in the business you're in? He's a Wall Street guy. He's making tons of money, millions of dollars. It was because my mother asked me to. I said, really? I said, well, what do you like about it? He said, nothing. I hate it. I said, well, what are you doing it for? Like, you could do anything. You're brilliant, you know? He goes, well, my mother loves me, and she told me that the only way I'm going to be successful is to make a lot of money on Wall Street. So I said, well, what's your mother do for a living? Well, she owns a little lawn business and she cuts lawns. I said, really? Okay. I said, what else did you like to do in your life? He goes, I'm looking for a long-term, meaningful relationship. I've been married twice and I'm only 32. He goes, I can't find the right person. I said, really? Well, who you talk to about that? He says, my mother. I said, oh, really? Like, well, like, we're starting to get a pattern here. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And he says, I said, well, what advice is mom giving you? You know? And she says, well, she loves me. You know, I said, what's her story? Well, she's been divorced 3 times. So I said, okay, well, if you want to be divorced a couple of more times and you want to cut lawns, you should probably talk to the mom a little bit more. I said, but if you want to figure out what you want to do, you got to start asking yourself better questions. And the first one is, who am I listening to? Who's already getting the results I want? How did I get sober? I found people who already know how to do that. I did what they did and I got what they got. Same thing works in finances. Same thing works in my marriage. So we started doing this stuff. It winds up, I'm still in touch with him. This was 10 years ago when we met. He wound up becoming an environmental guy, drilling wells in Morocco. How's that? And he married a Moroccan woman. He came back to the States. He has now this huge electrical business where he puts in X-ray machines and things like that in hospitals. And another thing he said is, I hate working in an office alone. I like being a part of a team. Like, here's a guy who could have done anything you want, and he was taking advice from somebody who loved him, but in that situation, it wasn't the right advice for him. So he
Right.
discovered what he wants, what he's doing, and now he's having a great life. He's got a couple kids, lives on a 40-acre farm. Life is good. So this is part of what I learned along the way is ask better questions, you get better answers. Figure out what is inside of you. What would you do for free? What would you do for nothing? Like if you do something for free, work becomes play. So like the idea is these are the type of things we pull out of people because to thine own self be true, Shakespeare said, right? You got to be true to yourself, because if not, you'll never be happy. And that's part of getting your finances, your relationships. Because if you can't get all these things right, you're probably not going to stay sober.
Yeah. Now you're talking about like finances and relationships. What role has spirituality played in your recovery, and how do you encourage others to kind of explore that spiritual growth, especially if they're not of the same religion as you or share your same exact worldviews?
And that's really big. You got to find, and I'll just speak for myself. I had to find a God of my understanding. Something I do not practice Catholicism or anything like that, but that was a big part of my recovery because what I had to do was I had to find a place of forgiveness. I used to judge the church. I used to judge the people who forced me out. I used to turn the other cheek and then they give you the boot, that kind of stuff. And then I realized that until I found forgiveness for the people who I was beating myself over the head with the same club of self-righteousness that the church had used on me. I was judging them. I'm calling them hypocrites. Aren't I being a hypocrite? Am I not judging them the same way? So I made a conscious decision that I said, look, just because that didn't work for me didn't mean it didn't work. It worked for my parents. It worked for other people. People find, relief from the Catholic religion. And that crumb of forgiveness and that crumb of empathy opened up enough space in my head for me to start seeking out a God of my understanding. And to me, the biggest thing I've gotten from recovery is a relationship with a God of my understanding. I could not stay sober. I used to think I survived everything I survived, all the accidents, all the fights, all the nonsense, because I just was so darn slick, just so cool. And now I know it was the grace of God keeping me around for some other reason, and that's the most important thing. If I cannot find a higher power of my understanding, it's been my experience. People say you can. My own experience is I would not be able to stay sober today. I turn everything over. I believe I believe I was created for a purpose. And I also believe that when I take action, fearless action, and don't look back, that purpose is revealed. And it's happened over and over again. I am the least likely person to have ever written a book, to have ever, um, you know, become super successful in business. I've had several entrepreneurial businesses, and the idea is we're not dumb people. None of us are. Most of us have average intelligence. We just got to get over our fear of being who we were created to be. And the only way I found to do that is through a God understanding. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I find it really interesting that you say, kind of this higher power of your understanding, because some people get really wrapped up in, no, you have to believe this way, you have to believe this thing, and this is the right one, and it sounds like you're just very open to it is what it is to you, and that's what matters. And I honestly wish more people who were religious or, um, you know, who had religious beliefs of any sort, spiritual beliefs, whatnot, we're more kind of tolerant and accepting and open to viewing things that way.
Well, if you look, I've done I spent a lot of time seeking. I really have. I've looked at, a lot of different religions, a lot of different spiritual backgrounds, and if you look, there is a common thread. There is, I heard one guy, I think it was Oliver Wendell Holmes said, right, my religious beliefs could be summed up in a couple of short things, and then one of them is the first words of the Lord Prayer, Our Father, we're all in this together, and the second one is do unto others as you have them do unto you. If you can handle them on a daily basis and really walk your talk, you're probably on the right track. You know what I mean? And it's very, very simple. So I enjoy that. I enjoy my spirituality is in constant flux. It grows and changes as my understanding increases. It's tough to teach the same thing to a 5-year-old as it is to a 40-year-old. We have different experiences, and I'm not judging anybody. For me, spirituality is a birthright, and a lot of religions, depending on who if it works for anybody, I'm happy for them. Are more traditions on ways of,
Yeah.
of group worship that they feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
But
That's
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 okay
very
too.
true. Yep, that if that works for you, that's great.
Yes, that's right.
But it doesn't
That's
work for
it.
everyone.
No, it doesn't, but one thing's for sure is, we're all part of this thing. I used to worship individuality and rebellion, and, I'm all by, I'm out there. I thought I was Shane riding off into the sunset, the old cowboy, that kind of gunfighter. And now I know, I looked up the word years ago, individual, and the original meaning of it is part of the whole, not separate from the whole. And I became part of the whole. I used to think I could do everything on my own. What can I do on my own? I didn't make the computer. I didn't make the shirt I'm wearing. I don't know what the paint's made of on the wall or anything else. I didn't grow my food. So we really need each other. And when I started thinking outside the box, more like that than being totally independent, my life got easier, got better, and people were willing to help me. Most people, except the rottenness or evilest among us, really try to help each other. If you
Mhm.
ask somebody for help, usually they'll give it to you. And when I started doing it, and then you get the joy of giving it back. Like nothing better than that.
Yeah.
Nothing better than that.
Now you believe that full recovery is teachable and replicable. I mean, you wrote a book about it, your whole website
Yep.
talks about it. What are some of kind of those key principles or practices that you found are universal for those who are striving for this kind of full abundant life after addiction?
Well, again, turn that focus to ask yourself better questions. Better questions produce better answers. Waking up, why do I have to wake up? How come I got to go to this crummy job? How come I can't pay the bills? These are really not productive ways to start your day. Asking yourself, who already knows how to solve my problem? Can I use their solution to solve my problem? Who already is getting the results I want? Things like this are much easier on you, and asking better questions. And I used to do that, and I used to write down uh, different ways of reminding myself. I put down in the beginning, I used to say, God wants me sober. God wants me happy. God wants me abundantly wealthy. God wants me spiritually fit. God wants me to help others. Boom. And every day, all day long, I'd remind myself instead of, boy, I'm thirsty. I want to go to the bar. How come I have such bad luck? Why can't I pay my bills? So I would interrupt that pattern. So like simple things like that. I learned that, fear is really the boogeyman that we all deal with, fear and doubt. And the only way for me to get over that was really to find a higher power of my understanding and then really work at it. Something as simple as, psychologists do this all. Something as picking your head up when you're feeling down. What does a down defeated person look like? Their heads down, they're slumped, shallow breathing, talking to themselves in an unproductive way. Something as simple as changing your physiology, picking your head up, moving with authority. My friend Mike was telling, never let lack of knowledge keep you from speaking with authority. I said, so I should just BS him? He goes, yeah, but it will make you feel better. He goes, when you feel better, you act better. When you act better, the world treats you differently. So this is these simple things. And, a lot of times people think they're spiritually grounded, put down the importance of being financially secure and having a nice career. And I don't believe that. I believe that being financially secure, having a career that juices you up, that makes you want to wake up in the morning, these are important ways to live life, because this isn't a dress rehearsal. This is the only life I'm having. So, these are all simple things that we do, because if not, it's been my experience, if you're not happy, you're going to go back to drinking and drugs. You know what I mean? It just, if life isn't getting any better, well, I tried it this way, they both stink. I better go for what I want. But when you keep stacking successes on top of each other, it becomes a pretty cool life. It really does. I've got 2 for 1. I know the whole dark side of my life. And I got to tell you, I have a life that I wish all your listeners could have. It's that good.
Yeah. You just got to kind of get there, right? You got to get
Yeah.
through, got to get
And
through
have
the darker side.
one day at a time, right? All I could do is live today. I can't change tomorrow. I can't change yesterday. But if I live today to the best of my ability, doesn't mean I never get down. Doesn't mean I don't have bad days and life doesn't happen. But if I do that, my future seems to take care of itself, because anybody can handle anything for one day,
Yeah.
and that's what I do. I handle it for today.
Yeah. I really love the one day at a time thing, and I love the rest of it also. So my ex was an alcoholic, and so I went to Al-Anon for a while, and one of the things that they talked about was that one day at a time, and they broke it down further to say, like, if you can't get through a day, anyone can do anything for a day, but if you feel like you can't, do it for one
Yep.
hour at a time. If you feel like you can't do an hour, do it for one moment at a time. And it's just like you break it into, okay, I got through that moment. Okay, I got through that hour. Okay, I got through the next hour. And now I've made it a day. And I think beyond addiction, like that's just a good thing to kind of keep in your back pocket for any situation, any sort of situation that you're in, whether you're an addict or not. It's like, if you don't think you can get through it for a week, can you get through it for a day? If you don't think you can get through it for a day, can you get through it for an hour? If you don't think you can get through it for an hour, can you get through it for the moment? And just make it to that next until you can get some other support around you, or until you can get the help that you need, or reach out and talk to a friend or talk to a therapist or anything like that. Like, it's just taking it, break it into whatever size chunk you need. That's a beautiful concept, and one that even though I personally am not an addict, that's one that I have definitely taken as my own.
Yeah. Well, think about it. You said support too, and how key is that? Back to think about it. The first words of the Lord's Prayer, Our Father. First words of the Constitution, we the people. First words of the first step of Alcoholics Anonymous, we admit it, not I admit it. We, it's a group thing. It really is, and people will
Yeah.
help you if you need help. And that's it. My wife's a big Al-Anon supporter, and it's funny because people who are in early recovery, like even in my treatment center stuff, like they really don't want their wives going to Al-Anon or their
Yeah.
husbands. Like
Yeah.
they might get too smart, that kind of deal. I tell them over and over again that it saved my marriage, saved my life. So it's a good thing. It's not bad. You want everybody. You know what happened? She got better. I got better. Then we got better,
Yeah.
and it turned into an adult relationship. Which is pretty damn cool.
That is good. That is good. I mean, you were adults at
Yeah.
the time, so.
Yes. I was a 33-year-old juvenile delinquent at the time.
Yep. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
certainly gotten better, you know.
That's good. That's good.
Uh,
Fight Mark says we have a life philosophy about big decisions. See if we feel the same in 4 days. I like that. It's not even a week.
yeah.
Can't handle your job and want to quit? You can in 4 days if you still feel the same. I like that. Like that kind of give yourself
Yes.
a specific time frame of I feel like shit right now. Am I going to feel the same? Am I still going to want to do this drastic action in 4 days? And if I do in 4 days, then maybe it's worth considering a little bit closer. Maybe it's worth examining and just kind of digging into that. And if you don't feel the same in 4 days, maybe it was just a shitty day, and that's okay because everybody has
Yeah.
shitty days, you know?
It happens.
Yeah, it really does.
Life happens as it will, you know.
Very true. In your experience working with other folks and other addicts, what are some common barriers to not just achieving sobriety, but also to getting to this thriving life that you're talking about? And how do you help people overcome anything that's really common?
Well, fear of change, fear, it's fear of failure, fear of success, fear there's not enough to go around. It's all fear based, and the deal is most most addicts that I've worked with and alcoholics, they fear success. They don't fear failure. They get very comfortable in failure. It becomes normal, what becomes acceptable over an extended period of time. So the idea is to get over that hurdle. It's different for everybody, but it's all the same thing. It's fear-based reality. And fear, most thing about most of our fears, of course people have situations, fight or flight experiences that keep them, running and for their own safety, whatever. But most of it's just misguided fantasies. It's misuse of my constructive imagination. I'm worrying about things that have not even taken place yet. And it happens over and over again, and we get in the habit. And what's a habit? Just a learned behavior that we develop and finally accept over time of thinking that way. So it's almost like me breaking that habit. Number one, I had a problem with a higher power and God, so I started my little moves with God wants me this, God wants me that, but it's sober, happy, healthy, helping others, abundant, you know, because again, I was raised in a place that where the parish where I was raised was kind of like you're supposed to stay poor, you're supposed to stay broke, you're supposed to think less of yourself, you're supposed to have original sin, which always bothered me. It's like, what's more innocent than a little baby? You know what I mean? So like, but yet, and money's bad, but give me yours.
Oh,
Yeah, you
yeah.
know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, money's not good, not bad. It's just a tool. It's just a commodity to be exchanged. When you have money, you can help somebody else who's less fortunate. In that respect, it's surely good. So the whole deal with this is when I'm working with people is you got to get down and find out really what makes them tick, like we did with the gentleman who had the Oxford education, or I mean, excuse me, the London School of Economics education. I see that over and over again. I work with a lot of people I used to take all the meetings into prison. I did it for years, because but for the grace of God, I'd be there. You know what I mean? And we did the same thing with people there. I'll share another brief story. I was in a place called Morristown, New Jersey, and it's the county seat. It's about a half hour outside of Manhattan, and I'm there with somebody else who I know in the program who I'm supporting. He's got court problems, and this guy starts yelling at me from a block away, Brian, 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 and I turn around. And it's this big black gentleman, probably about 6'6". He's running down me. He's waving. I said hi. He goes, remember me? And I'm like, yeah, I didn't remember, what I mean, but I just being a nice guy. He goes, yeah, yeah, yeah. You came in and you taught us that full recovery program. I said, yeah. He goes, you know what I did? He goes, I got out. He's probably about 45. He goes, so when I got out, I went to my sister. I said, you know what? I want to mow your lawn. She says, you just want to steal my stuff. I said, no, no, I swear I don't. Yeah. He goes, so I mowed it for free for 3 weeks. He said, her neighbor said, boy, you're doing a nice job over there. So I mowed the neighbor. He goes, I've been doing this now for a year and a half. I got 6 guys working for me. I have all these people. I'm making all this money. I got my own business. He goes, who would have thought? He goes, that that taking care of people instead of stealing from them would be really good for me. You know what I mean? So the guy was like a really like, he was like somebody probably was homeless at one time, you know?
Yeah.
So my point is we all have the same aspirations. When you hear people say, oh, they could quit if they want, they're just an addict or whatever. Let me tell you, nobody wants to be a junkie. It's a
Yeah.
horrible life. Nobody wants to hate themselves. And it's like I said, it's a slow form of suicide. So what we do is we teach people how to have self-esteem, how to feel good about being themselves. We asked them what you do for free. I had another guy, he said he was 52 years old. He was a 30-year heroin addict. I said, next to Keith Richards, you're the oldest living heroin addict in the country. You know what I mean? He says, no, no. I says, what are you gonna do with your life? He's like, I don't know. I was like, well, what do you like to do? He goes, well, if you could do anything, I'd like to be Derek Jeter. I said, well, look, let's face it, you probably couldn't play ball when you were a kid. So
Yeah.
you're 52-year-old, you're not going to do it. But it gives you clues to what makes you feel good. He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, you could trade memorabilia. You could be an umpire. You could be a coach. You could work at a sporting goods store. Why if the guy had he had uh, a degree in writing. He started writing for the local newspaper on a little sports beat. So the things when you do that, you feel good about yourself. So this is how we try drawing people into life and making them feel good about who they are, not what they've done. Because the two things are completely different. And anybody can get sober. Anybody can stay sober. And we all deserve to be loved. We all deserve a good life. Be sober, free, and loved is real wealth we all can handle.
Yeah. And I like talking about, anybody can get sober, anybody can change this part of themselves because it's true. Like a lot of things that you think are going to be this big deal, 5 years from now, it's not going to matter to anyone. 10 years from now, no one's even going to remember. And so sometimes I think we get really wrapped around the axle about something that we've done or something that we've said in the wrong way. I'm an overthinker. I have anxiety. I sit in bed at night and do this. So I'm mainly talking about myself here, but no one's going to remember the screw ups if you do something different next time. If you learn from your past and you do things differently, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay down the line. And it could look completely, completely different from what it looks like today. But it's hard to see that
That's a
in the
fact.
moment.
It is. No, you're 100% right. And we're all human. We're all guilty of that.
Yeah.
First person I had to forgive was myself. The decisions I made, I was out of my mind. Why with such a poisoned brain and the way I acted, it wasn't because I was an evil person, a bad person, because I was a sick person. The reason it's called a disease, it's dis-ease, it's an uneasiness that people get and they take a few drinks or pills or whatever their poison is, and they get that sense of ease and comfort that calms them down. But then, if you have what I have, if you're an addict, one's never enough. I mean, I'm off to the races. So all I can do is I have to avoid taking that first drink.
Yeah.
I had a guy tell me years ago. He says, he asked me, I was sober probably about 15 minutes. I said probably a couple of months, and old guy, he's probably younger than I am now, and he says, how much you drinking? I said, about a quart of Jack Daniels a day, a couple of six pack. I said, depending on how much dry goods I'm using. And he's like, the first drink gets you drunk. I'm like, man, you're not listening. I'm drinking it. He goes, what do you mean I'm not listening? I said, well, I'm drinking a quart a day. Drink can't get me drunk. He goes, try to get drunk without it. And it was like, duh. And I realized then, as long as I don't pick up the first one, I'll never be drunk. I'll never be high. And that's why I've been doing this post. Here's my dog, Mickey. Mick. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. I love dogs.
Uh, that's it. Yeah, that's it. That's Mickey. So, like, the idea is I've just been postponing that first drink for a lot of
Yeah.
today's, and it turns into a really good life. Really good life. And anybody can have it. Anybody out there. I'm telling you, you can have it.
Yeah. Do you need to let your dog out or anything?
No, no. My wife just came home,
Oh, okay. All
so
right. So
he heard the
she's getting
garage
a
door go
greeting.
up.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you said you have a Rottweiler, right? Does he talk to
Yeah, yeah.
you? Like some Rottweilers are
Yeah,
really like vocal about things.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
fun.
I said I've had a bunch of them. Yeah, they're
Yeah,
good dogs.
that's awesome.
It's,
I love Rottweilers. They're so cute. I mean, they look terrifying, right? Generally speaking, but they're so cute, and they're usually big softies.
yep, you're not kidding. They really are.
Yeah.
I was breeding for a while, and what a joy that was. I had a bunch of puppies around, a couple of cats, a couple of horses. It was like,
Uh,
who would have thought it? You know what I mean? It's like that's what life's about. I mean, it's
yeah,
about sucking it all up and enjoying it. And not beating ourselves down and picking on ourselves for what we are or what we aren't. You know,
yeah,
that's really the truth, in my
absolutely.
experience, anyway.
No, no, I definitely agree. You talked earlier about kind of the successes that you experienced in rebuilding your career. What were some of the challenges that you faced when you were trying to rebuild your personal life? And do you think that your mindset uh, really played into the transformation that you saw? Were there any adjustments you had to make along the way, or anything that didn't work whenever you were
A
freshly
lot of things do,
recovering? Yeah.
and patience. I mean, I have zero. You know, a guy actually told me, Brian, everybody wants everything yesterday. You want it 2 days ago. And that's really the truth. And I had to get with that. I had to get with same thing we talk about, keeping it in the day, doing the best I can today. Because if
Yeah.
not, I start placing unrealistic expectations on myself and other people, which doesn't make any. I remember running a group of leaders for a company, and everybody made a full bonus. I mean, like big money, like big stock bonus. And I never saw a more unhappy group of people. And I realized it was me because I was driving myself to the point. Again, I told you earlier that I was not. I was getting unhealthy with my workload, and I was expecting everybody else to keep up with what I was doing, and it just didn't work out well. I saw Magic Johnson on TV about that time, and he was talking about when he was a kid. He says, he was the best guy on every team he played, of course. He says, so like when he was a little kid, like in grammar school, the coaches would all, they all want to win. So they're saying, throw the ball at him and let him shoot. So he says, he goes, we won every game. He goes, I'm getting 30, 40 points a game. The rest of the team's walking around kicking the dirt, having a miserable time. And he goes,
Yeah.
and I had a little epiphany. He goes, so the next time I'm running down, the guys will throw it to Johnson. He threw it to me. He goes, I threw it back to him. And I yelled, shoot. And he goes, and I kept doing that. He goes, and that's how I became one of the best ball handlers in the league. Because I got so much joy out of watching everybody else shoot. And when we won, everybody jumped up and down. And I filed that away because success leaves clues. It's just not everybody who's achieved anything noteworthy in life. Number one is they have goals. That's something else I had to realize. You've got to have a goal. If I aimed at nothing, I was going to hit it. So I had to make my goals big enough to be inspirational. Really a crazy stretch because that's just the way I'm made. Like alcoholics and addicts. Think about it. They're risk takers by nature. Like they really just go for it. So I had to be me, and I did that. But I also had to read on it. I had to search out higher truths, not just spiritually, but people who already were getting the financial, results I wanted, who were having good relationships, who were uh, finding their way in a career path. And I've changed careers several times, and if I start getting too bored in something I'm doing, like your friend, you're talking about 4 days, right? I start looking for something a little bigger. It's going to excite me. Because that's just the way I am. Other people find something they're excited and enjoy their whole life. We're all different. But that's me. I'm a real type A kind of guy, bouncing off the walls.
Yeah, got to move to the next thing. I'm one of those. I gotta
Yeah.
have every 4 or 5 years. I'm like, okay, what's next? All right, what's next? This has been fun, but now what?
Yeah,
Even
exactly.
if
You
I'm
want a
really doing
challenge.
something, yeah, even if I'm doing something that I'm good at and I love doing, even at that point, I'm like, all right, what's next? What's new? I need something to engage, something new to learn. That's my biggest thing is like I haven't learned anything new in the last 2 years. It's time. So, yeah.
Exactly. I'm the
You
same
gotta have
way.
the challenge, yeah. Some people love
But
that,
you know
and
what?
some people just want the stability. And there's not a right way to be. You be whichever one you want,
No.
but figure out what kind of person you are. Like, which kind of person are you? Are you someone who wants? Are you a person who's seeking that out, or are you someone who wants that stability? You want to settle in, and you want to say, "I'm good at this. This is what I love. This is where I want to be," and then you just stay there, and that's okay too. Like, I'm not saying that the way I am sometimes is a little bit miserable. So don't think that I'm the right way to be.
Yeah, that's I get it. That's that frustration though.
Yeah.
That's what it is,
Yeah,
I
for
read
sure.
something about Walt Disney that, he had a brother that was in the business with him, and he had another brother who was a postal worker. And somebody said, "How come you didn't bring your brother on board?" He goes, "What are you talking about? My brother loves his life. He likes that. He goes home. He knows what he's doing every day. This would be horrible for him. He
Yeah.
knows he could have been here. So it's like you got to be yourself. Be true to yourself."
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a settle in. See, I'm a settle in and get comfortable person. Gonna get so good at being where I am. Yeah, and that's perfect for some people. For some people, it's really not, and you have to kind of know. You have to figure that out and know which one it is. Otherwise, you're going to set yourself up for a failure. Whether you are this kind of person or that kind of person, if you're not sure, you're not going to take those right steps to do what you need to do for your own career fulfillment and your own personal fulfillment. So,
It was nice is like my wife is like she's been an administrative person her whole life, and she's great at what she does. But what I do, she wouldn't like it. She
yeah,
doesn't like, she couldn't take it. But the deal is her strengths and my strengths complement each other. You know what I mean? So her weaknesses and my weaknesses are different. Her strength. So together we're a better team than we ever would have been alone.
yeah.
And that's really what it is. And I don't try to change her, and she don't try to change me. We support each other, which is really a gift. Everybody doesn't have that.
No, absolutely. So, we're kind of talking about like family and career already. So, how do you balance that personal life and career and your ongoing commitment to recovery? Is that still a balancing act for you? Or are you pretty settled into kind of like this is the balance that I need and this is how I've crafted my life? And what advice would you give to others who are struggling to find that balance or hoping in the future to arrive at that balance?
I one thing that worked for me is I wrote a list of a whole bunch of different, and it's actually part of our program, different qualities that I want in my life. It could be everything from education and family to travel to work to career to all these things. And then I put them in order of importance. Like what's really most important to me. And like, I sort of finding like some of them weren't in harmony with one each other. Like if I want to be, the best father to a small child and I want unlimited travel, it's kind of a tough balancing act there. So I had to get down. And then once I got my goals and my ideas in order, like I started moving them in a direction. Now I had a game plan for going there. And as far as balance, I can still go up balance. It's one of my things I struggle with. And uh, the last couple of years I had to cut down. I had a couple of businesses going. I was getting the software up. I had the center. I had all these things going on, and it was too much. And it was making me unhappy, and like that's not the goal of this. I've been able to meet a lot of people through my businesses and different things I've done that have become wildly successful. And a couple stand out like on Wall Street that I know, and they made fabulous wealth like they've never thought. And they still show up every day there doing the same thing that's not making them happy, making more money they're never going to spend and don't have a clue why. Like I don't want to come to the end of the rainbow here at the end and not think I did. I want to leave it all on the field. I want to go out there and think everything I did for a reason. I did the best I could with the gifts I've had, and enjoy life. So if I'm not happy, it's not worth it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know this guy in a 12-step program. I had a guy who I was with business, and he says, "You seem pretty happy." I said, "Yeah, I am." He goes, "Can I talk to you?" I said, "Sure." So the guy was about 35. He's probably at $10 million. His wife looked like a model. His kids look like models. And I said, I'm looking at him thinking, boy, this guy's got it together. He goes, I said, how about you? Are you happy? He goes, not really. I said, well, what's your problem here? And he said, well, to be, successful, you got to have 7% body fat, and I'm at 8.5. And, to be successful, you got to have 50 million, and I only have 10. And he goes to this list that's like this impossible list. And I'm looking at him saying, well, I went to a 12-step meeting that night, and I walked in, and this guy goes walking by, is always bouncing off the walls. I said, hey, Joe, you happy? Oh, yeah. I ate today. I didn't have a drink. Life's great. Who's got it better than me? And I'm thinking, like, here's a guy who's really, barely getting by, and here's a guy with everything, and he's miserable. So happiness is an inside job. You know what I mean? Like Lincoln said it, right? Most folks are about as happy as they make up their minds to be. That's really the truth. So I try to make it so when I'm starting to get unhappy, I start taking different actions in my life, cut things back, look at things differently. What's really going on here? Because if not, I'll go right down the drain, and I'm not ready to do that yet.
Yeah. The thought of happiness being an inside job is very it's something that I think a lot of people don't get, because you can on paper, or if you're telling someone else, I have this, you can seem successful and happy. But success and happy don't always equate, It's not one or the other. You could be living, something that someone else would consider a miserable life and be perfectly happy with what you have. You could be living what someone else would consider an extravagant life, like an overabundance of everything life. And you can be miserable when someone else is like, you've got to be happy. You must be happy, right? It's not
Yeah,
that. It's what's on the inside. Do you feel happy? It's a feeling.
that's it. I looked up the word joy years ago. I was looking for joy, and I said, what's joy really mean? And it said calm delight. And I was like, I can go for some calm delight because I'm like this kind of guy. I always chased excitement and adventure. And I look at that now. That's what, like I said, that's when I walk. That's when I sit in my hot tub. That's when I pet the dog. That's when used to take a ride on my horse. It was like, okay, just stop. Where you rushing to? I'm rushing to the dirt nap like everybody else.
Yeah.
I don't want, I don't want to do that. I want to enjoy the moment. And that's really what it's at. So calm delight's always a good thing.
That's a great phrase, calm delight for joy. What do you hope that folks take away from your story and from this approach to recovery?
That if you're not having fun in recovery, you're probably not doing it right. You really talk to somebody again who's accomplishing what you want to accomplish, who seems to have what you're interested in, and ask them for advice. Ask them, people give you advice. It's the cheapest commodity on the planet, worth everything it costs. But when I find somebody that really looks like they're there, I ask them how they do. And I ask people, I'll give you an example too with recovery. For the first 5 years I was in recovery. When somebody relapsed, I would ask them what they thought about what they did. What so I wanted to know. I wanted to file that way in my recovery checking account, so I had something to draw on. I might run into the same situation. So like that's something really important is to find somebody who's already achieving or moving in the direction that you want. Um, First you got to find out what you want, and there's work involved in this. Ask yourself the right questions. What would I do for free? What would I do if money was no object? Yeah, unlimited time, freedom, and money. What would you do? You already dated everybody you want, had 9 new cars, traveled the world 4 times, and have 8 houses. Now what do you want to do? Really is in there, that's inside of you. And when you start asking those questions, like the guy who was turned into writing the newspaper articles, he felt good and he had self-esteem. Boy, I felt good about myself. And let's face it, contribution is really what makes you feel good. When you're of service and somebody feels good about it, there's nothing better, really is. I used to think if I want more, I had to take more. Now I know if I want more, I got to give more. Everything I learned was kind of ass backwards. So, these are things that if you're in recovery and you're struggling, I mean, I'll give myself a plug. Get get Freedom 365, the software, and I guarantee you his 365-day program of action. It's interactive. It's not about most self-help books you read. I read all the statistics on it. Most self-help books, 95% of self-help books that are purchased are never read. Everybody says they want to change, they don't do it. And they also say that with self-help, women read 70% of it, not men, because men think they know everything. And they're afraid to admit they don't, and that's ignorance. And I'm not judging, but it really is. It's ignorance. It's not reaching out there and saying, hey, listen, I don't know everything. I never did. I never will. But the idea is if I learned something today, it hasn't been a wasted day. So I just hope that people, they want to go, you go to mymentalhealth.org. We're giving away some stuff there. And anybody use it, anybody can learn, and we'd appreciate it if you'd leave a donation, because we put it all out there. And VRS for Virtual Recovery System, Freedom 365. If you want to learn how to be successful in everything you do in life, it's the same thing. Everything I learned in recovery, I took into my business. Everything I learned in my business, I took into my marriage. It's all the same stuff.
All kind of tied together. So I want to talk a little bit more about the Freedom 365 and the My Mental Health platform. Can you talk, just explain what those are and kind of how they are helping shape the future of recovery?
Sure. Being in the treatment industry, people didn't have, I'll start with this. A lot of people don't have good mental health care anymore. And trying to get mental health coverage is even harder than getting physical health.
Yeah.
They say it's supposed to be parity, but it's not a fact. They don't do it. We've had people turned down with great insurance. The insurance companies don't want to pay. It's just plain and simple. There's only two ways for an insurance company to make money: either raise prices or give out less services. It's pretty simple. The idea is take it all in, refuse to give it out. So, that's where the idea for our virtual recovery systems came from. Is I saw people couldn't get the help they needed. And even when they do, they're getting like 2 weeks, 2 days, 2 months, whatever the case may be. I drank and drugged for 20 years almost. And the idea is, it's a 24/7 thing. So with Freedom 365, we started out with 75 interactive videos and a couple of help tools that we help. We're up to over 600 interactive videos,
Wow.
searchable on everything recovery. You name it. I'm fighting with my wife. I feel like drinking. My boss just fired me. Whatever you think, it's searchable. Boom. Because they figured out that if you can interrupt a negative thinking pattern, as little as 2 minutes, you can stop a relapse. So when people use this product, it's got everything from goal setting workshops to daily workshops to uh, we have an empowerment button. I'm going to pick up. We have 3 levels of stressor. I feel like I don't feel good. Search out a video. So we have daily videos, 365 videos every day. You start your day in a productive way. So the idea is we're taking everything that myself, my clinicians, and everybody I've been run into in 34 years of recovery, and we put it in something in the palm of your hand that's accessible 24/7. Because when I got sober, there was 12-step meetings, which are fantastic. I highly recommend them. But, it was 23 other hours in a day when life happened.
Yeah.
So we this is how we use life now. This is how we learn. This is how we communicate with each other. So everything in here, it would be it's an hour presentation just to go through the features that are in this. So, the idea is we want to help people not just succeed staying sober. We want them to thrive. We want them to
Yeah.
get their families back. We want their career choices to be the right thing, overcome financial scarcity. Working for a minimum wage job, frying chicken, in the local chicken joint doesn't excite me, and I don't think it does anybody else either. And the idea is when we learn to use that thing under our skull cap, part of it is learning how to think. That's really what this whole thing's about, learning how to think. And everybody's answers are different. My answer is I'm different than you. Your goals, your dreams, your aspirations. So the thing is, we ask the right questions. You come up with the answers, and we give you the skill set to overcome your fear of turning it into reality. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Really is cool.
It sounds like there's a lot of resources. So Freedom 365, is this only on Apple? Is it Google? Is it both?
It's you can get it as a web app. You can get it on Apple. You can get it on Google. You can get it anywhere. And we've actually had guys that were homeless that didn't have a phone and went and did it at the library,
Oh,
and
that's
that's how they
awesome.
started.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like they really wanted to do it. They wanted to change their life. Where there's a will, there's that intense, single-minded focus. That's it. Got a
Yeah.
job where one guy I'm thinking of got a job as a mechanic. He's before he crashed and burned, he was a mechanic. He wound up getting a job back as a mechanic. Got himself a little apartment. You know, we had a guy who took a picture. Like part of it's a gratitude. We have a gratitude library, so like you interrupt those negative thoughts. So you can take pictures, you can put text or whatever like that. So when you're thinking about picking up, picture of your kid, picture of your dog, picture of your cat, whatever, whatever. We had a guy who was a Wall Street guy, and he drank himself out of everything, and put a picture of a suit. He hadn't had a new suit in 15 years, and that was his goal. And when he got that suit, he texted me a picture of him in that suit, and it was pretty darn cool. You know what I mean? He was back in action, back in the game.
Yeah. Just that little
So
bit of
it's a lot of
motivating
fun.
factor. Yeah. Yeah. That sounds really neat. And then the My Mental Health platform, that's a different website from Freedom 365.
Yes, and that's something that we're doing. We're giving away similar product. It's more youth orientated. I mean, the way it's laid out, and it's pretty cool. And we're giving it away absolutely free right now. And we ask for donations because it isn't free. We pay
Yeah.
for it. And all the just we want to keep the servers going. Right now, My Mental Health has been downloaded in 6 different countries and tens of thousands of people. So we're pretty excited about that. It's available in English and Spanish. And the whole goal there is same deal. Like everybody has dreams and aspirations. Nobody wants to be an alcoholic. Nobody wants to be a junkie. But somebody got to show them how to get out of there, and
Yeah.
that's what we do. We say like I got involved with that and with the book and everything because my sister and her son both overdosed and died on opiates. So I saw the impact it had on my family and my mother, my father. So things are. So that's what we're doing. We're giving it all away. We're paying it forward. We're seeing who we can help.
Yeah. I'm sorry for your loss there, for sure.
Yeah,
That's a
no,
hard thing.
without a doubt. A lot of people have it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But
Yeah.
here's the deal. We can't change that back in the day, but
True.
we can help the next person. Hopefully
Yes. Yeah.
somebody else will get the idea.
Absolutely. Well, we're coming up on the last couple of questions. So, folks who are here while we're live, if you have any other questions, feel free to pop them into the chat. We'll make sure to ask them while we're live. But we're going to get to these last couple of standard questions
Okay.
before we let you go. So, what's your favorite life hack?
I would have to say walking. Is that
Yeah.
simple? So the simplest thing in the world. When all else fails, put it down, close the lid on the computer, grab your dog, take a nice long walk, and go exhale. And when I do that, everything seems to be better when I come back, more
Yeah.
productive. Such a simple thing.
Nice, good thoughts order. That's what you need. Okay, well, it is time for the magic moment of the stream. If you had a magic wand and you could eliminate one common opinion or misconception or theory surrounding mental health and mental illness, what would it be?
That they could change if they want to. That they can that you really want to be like you are. And it's a disease. It's an illness. No matter what it is with mental health. Oh, it's something else with I didn't even mention it. We just added anxiety, trauma, and PTSD to our Freedom 365 package. It's a shorter program. It's got it. Both programs have an assessment. You put the DSM the set 5 assessment right with the PTSD program, because our program treats our our treatment center treats a lot of first responders. We have
Oh,
everything from,
interesting.
cops, firemen, Homeland Security, FBI, and most of them were servicemen, and most of them have PTSD or at least trauma. A
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
rape victims. We have all kinds of stuff, and the idea is we provide them with an assessment, and then we give them a quick, I say quick, probably half hour of 8 module course, and then we take them through the product, the Freedom 365 substance use, because 40% of the people who have substance use disorder also qualify for trauma and PTSD. So the idea is there's a lot of crossover, and a lot of people start self-medicating with mental
Yeah.
health disorders. So, they kind of go hand in hand. So we include that in our program too, in the My Mental Health, and in the and I guess our next one will probably get into depression, like the big three. But the idea is we want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to get some type of help. There's something available, even if you don't have a dime and you don't have any insurance or anything like that. You matter. You're important. You have a right to be here, and you have a right to be happy, and we really believe that. So that's why we put our money where our mouth is. But I'm sorry, I lost the question now. I'm talking so much.
That's okay. We were just talking about what you would change kind of about mental health, mental illness, and I think you hit it
Yeah,
right on the head.
that's it. It's like if you give people the tool, and all you need is a crumb of willingness. That
Yeah.
you can give them the tools. Like can't make a horse drink, right? Like they say, lead them to water. But if you want it and you're just willing, to try, just one little step, one day at a time, you can greatly improve your life.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Well, I will open it up to you and just say if there's anything else that you want to mention or resources we didn't talk about. I will go ahead and post all of your socials so that people can connect with you one more time. But yeah, I'll just give you the floor for a minute while I do that and uh, let you talk about anything we didn't get to cover today.
Talked plenty. I'm a pretty gabby guy, but I just want to say that if you're struggling, don't give up. Don't give up. If I can do this, you can do this. I've seen people come back from miracles happen. How's that? And I mean it. I expect a miracle. I really do in my life. I've had so many things happen that shouldn't have happened that I know they happen. All you have to do is friend of mine is a cop in New York City today. Show up, suit up, and look alert. You know what I mean? It's really that's what you have to do. You have to show up. Find yourself if you're someone with a substance use disorder. Find yourself a 12-step meeting. Just walk in. I guarantee, stick your hand out, have a cup of coffee. I guarantee. First time I went there, I didn't like it. I was angry. I hated everybody, but I kept coming back. You know what I mean? And eventually, it's like wrestling. Bring the head, the body follows. That's what happens. You keep showing up and you start listening to people. You start thinking, I think like that. I act like that. These people seem reasonably happy. I'll use that. My dad called me up. My dad's he just went to hospice. He's 90 years old, but he called me up when he was 65 years old. And he says, I used to drink with my dad. I was sober about 10 years, and he had just gotten his second DUI, and he was drinking himself to death. And he says, "You seem reasonably happy. What are you doing?" I said, "You know what I'm doing." So he started doing what I was doing, the same thing we talked about. He lived to be 90, and he had a lot of good
Wow.
years. You know what I mean? And him and my mom are both still alive. So the point is, you're never too old. You're never too young. Just give it a chance. You're worth it. God didn't create any garbage. We're all worth it. We're all here for a reason. So if there's anything, go to VRS Freedom 365, or go to mymentalhealth.org and download it and take a look and see if you can relate to some of the stuff in there. If not, you don't like it, we'll gladly refund your misery. How's that?
There you go. Well, I've got those
There
links
you
for
go.
everyone. If you're looking for them and you're here live, they're going to be in the chat box below. If you are listening to this later, they will be in the episode description. So make sure to click through on all of those and use what is useful to you. And I hope that something that you click through is useful. I hope that you find something, to learn from and all that good stuff. But Bite Mark says, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. A very enjoyable conversation. Now I have some new resources to check out, and I'll echo that as well. Thank you, Brian, for taking the time out today and just joining us for this conversation. It's been a blast.
Thank you, Mama. I really appreciate you having me on. And God bless everybody out there. You're worth
Yeah.
it.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Even Tacos Fall Apart. Brian's journey from addiction to building a fulfilling, purpose-driven life is a powerful reminder that transformation is possible, even when it feels impossible. What really stuck with me was Brian's approach to recovery as something bigger than just staying sober. He talked about replacing unhealthy habits with meaningful goals and figuring out what makes life worth living for you. That's something we can all take to heart, whether we're in recovery or just trying to navigate the ups and downs of everyday life. Brian's focus on asking better questions, like who already knows how to solve my problem, or what do I want my life to look like, is such a practical tool. It's a small shift in mindset, but it can lead to big changes. So maybe that's something to try this week. Take one area of your life that feels stuck and ask yourself a better question. You might be surprised at the answers that come up. As we head into the rest of January, remember to check in with yourself. The new year can bring a lot of pressure to do and be more, but it's okay to take it slow. Growth isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up for yourself, even when it's messy or hard. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd love it if you could take a moment to like, subscribe, or leave a review. Your support helps this show grow and reach more people who might need to hear these conversations. And don't forget to share this episode with someone who could use a little inspiration. It's amazing what a simple share can do. You can also find me on social media, where I share updates about the show, connect with listeners, and post mental health resources. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode or just chat about life, so come say hi. That's it for today. Thank you for being here and for being part of this community, and for taking the time to invest in yourself. I'll see you next time on Even Tacos Fall Apart. Until then, take care of yourself, because you matter.